Robert Hayes stood at the massive window of his corner office, overlooking the city he'd conquered. At 45, he had everything society told him constituted success: a multi-million-dollar business empire, a mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood, cars that cost more than most people's homes, and enough money to last several lifetimes. Yet as he stared at the gleaming skyscrapers bearing his company's name, the hollowness in his chest only seemed to expand. "Mr. Hayes," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Dr. Carroll's office called. They need to reschedule Lily's appointment tomorrow." Robert sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Fine. Whatever works for them." 3 years. It had been 3 years since his daughter Lily had spoken a single word. 3 years since cancer had taken his wife Elizabeth, and with her, seemingly his daughter's voice. At 12 years old, Lily Hayes was physically healthy in every way, but she remained locked in a silence that the best specialists in the country couldn't penetrate. They also mentioned a new experimental therapy program in Switzerland. His assistant added hesitantly, "The waiting list is 2 years, but with your connections," they suggested. "Book it," Robert interrupted. "Whatever it costs." That evening, as his chauffeur drove them through the ornate gates of their 10-acre estate, Robert glanced at his daughter in the rear-view mirror. Lily sat perfectly still, her blonde hair nearly identical to her mother's, staring out the window with those piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. Her small hands were folded neatly in her lap, the very picture of the proper young heiress he'd raised her to be. But she didn't smile anymore. She didn't laugh. And she certainly didn't speak. "Ms. Lily has been drawing again," Mrs. Garcia, their housekeeper, informed him as they entered the marble foyer. She handed Robert a sheet of paper with colorful crayon markings. She spent all afternoon on it. Robert studied the drawing of their mansion, represented by a giant gray square, surrounded by an equally gray wall. Inside the wall, a tiny figure with yellow hair stood alone. Outside, vibrantly colored stick figures seemed to be playing. Even with his limited artistic interpretation skills, the message was painfully clear. "Thank you, Mrs. Garcia," he said, carefully folding the drawing and placing it in his pocket. "Has she eaten?" "Not much, sir. Just a few bites." Robert nodded and watched as Lily climbed the grand staircase to her room, a princess, ascending to her tower, locked away from the world by invisible chains that all his money couldn't break. Later that night, after reviewing contracts and taking calls from international partners, Robert found himself standing outside Lily's bedroom door. He knocked softly, then entered when no response came. Not that he expected one. Lily sat by her window, looking out at the moonlit garden below. Her room was filled with every toy, game, and device a child could want, most barely touched. "Hey, sweetheart," Robert said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Mrs. Garcia showed me your drawing. It's very good." Lily didn't turn from the window. "I was thinking," he continued, the silence stretching uncomfortably between them, "maybe this weekend we could go somewhere. The beach house, perhaps? Or Disneyland. You used to love the teacup ride." His daughter finally looked at him, her expression so reminiscent of Elizabeth that it made his chest ache. She simply shook her head, then returned her gaze to the window. Robert sighed, getting up to kiss the top of her head. "Good night, Lily. I love you." As he closed her door, he leaned against the hallway wall, loosening his tie in frustration. He had built an empire from nothing, climbing from his working-class roots to the very top. He could solve any business problem, negotiate any deal, crush any competitor. But he couldn't reach his own daughter. "Mrs. Hayes always said the garden was her voice," Mrs. Garcia said quietly, appearing with fresh towels for Lily's bathroom. "Perhaps what Miss Lily needs can't be bought, Mr. Hayes." Robert straightened, uncomfortable with the personal observation from an employee. "Thank you, Mrs. Garcia. That will be all for tonight." But as he retreated to his study for a glass of aged scotch, the housekeeper's words echoed in his mind. "Last one to the creek is a rotten egg." Miguel Rodriguez called out, sprinting ahead of his friend with a laugh that bubbled up from deep in his chest. At 13, Miguel was the fastest runner in their neighborhood, a talent that had earned him a spot on the middle school track team, despite his worn-out sneakers. His mother worked double shifts at the hospital as a cleaning lady to keep food on the table for him and his 2 younger sisters, but what they lacked in money, they made up for in love. No fair. You got a head start, shouted Jamal Washington, his long legs pumping as he tried to catch up. At 14, Jamal was the oldest of the trio, living with his grandmother in the apartment building next to Miguel's. His father was serving time, and his mother had disappeared years ago. But his grandmother's strength and the local community center's basketball program kept him focused on a better future. "You're both cheaters," wheezed Tyler Bennett, trailing behind. Small for his 12 years, with thick glasses and asthma, Tyler was the brain of their group. His single dad worked construction jobs when he could get them, which wasn't often enough lately. Tyler's escape was books borrowed secondhand, or from the library, and adventures with his two best friends. The three boys raced through their neighborhood, a collection of rundown apartment buildings and small homes that had seen better days. They dodged clotheslines, jumped over cracked sidewalks, and waved the old men playing dominoes on stoop corners. Every day after school, they explored different parts of the city, turning even the most mundane areas into realms of adventure. Today, they had decided to follow the creek that ran along the border between their neighborhood and Hillcrest, the wealthiest enclave in the city. "Whoa!" Tyler whispered as they reached the edge of a massive property. "Look at that." Before them stood an imposing stone wall, but it was what rose behind it that took their breath away, a mansion that looked like something from a movie, with perfectly manicured grounds stretching as far as they could see. "That's the Hayes place," Jamal said, impressed despite himself. "My grandma cleans for some people who know them. Says the guy who owns it is so rich he could buy our whole neighborhood and not even notice." Miguel whistled. "Must be nice." "Yeah, but Grandma also says they're not happy. The mom died a few years ago, and the daughter doesn't talk, like, at all." Tyler adjusted his glasses, squinting at the property. "Hey, check that out." He pointed to a spot where the wall was partially obscured by overgrown bushes. "There's like a garden or something back there." The boys approached cautiously, ducking through a gap in the bushes. They found themselves in front of a section of wrought iron fence that offered a view into what appeared to be a separate garden within the larger estate, a riot of colorful flowers, stone pathways, and a small fountain tinkling peacefully. "This is amazing," Tyler breathed, pressing his face against the bars. "It's like something from The Secret Garden." "The what?" Miguel asked, peering through. "It's a book," Tyler explained, "about a garden that helps heal people." "Guys," Jamal interrupted, his voice dropping to a whisper, "we're not alone." Sitting on a stone bench by the fountain was a girl about their age, with blonde hair falling over her face as she stared down a book in her lap. She wore an expensive-looking dress and shiny shoes that seemed impractical for a garden, but it was her stillness that struck them. She looked like a porcelain doll placed carefully in a display. Miguel, always the friendliest, called out before his friends could stop him. "Hey there." The girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. For a moment, it seemed she might flee, but curiosity appeared to win out over fear. She stared at them, making no move to approach or respond. "I'm Miguel," he continued, undeterred by her silence. "These are my friends Jamal and Tyler. We didn't mean to bother you. We were just exploring." The girl tilted her head slightly, studying them. "What's your name?" Miguel asked. She remained silent, but reached for a small notepad beside her, wrote something, and held it up to them. In neat handwriting, it read, "Lily." "Nice to meet you, Lily," Tyler said, offering a small wave. "That's a beautiful garden. Did you plant it?" Lily shook her head and wrote again. "My mother did. I take care of it now." "You're doing a great job," Jamal offered, feeling slightly awkward. "Those blue flowers are awesome." A ghost of a smile touched Lily's lips as she wrote. "Delphiniums," they were her favorite. "We should probably go," Tyler said, noticing the darkening sky. "We're not supposed to be here." Lily quickly scribbled something else and held it up. "Will you come back tomorrow?" The three friends exchanged surprised glances. "Sure," Miguel answered with a bright smile. "Same time." Lily nodded, something like hope flickering in her eyes. As the boys turned to leave, Miguel glanced back to see her watching them through the fence, looking less like a doll and more like a bird in a gilded cage. The next day and each day after, the boys returned to the garden fence. At first, their conversations were awkward, Lily writing short responses while they chattered about their day, neighborhood stories, or whatever came to mind. They were from different worlds, separated by wealth, circumstance, and an iron fence. But slowly, something magical began to happen. Lily started bringing her notebook directly to the fence, her messages growing longer and more frequent. She'd share facts about the flowers, bits about her life, and questions about their genuine curiosity about a world so different from her own. The boys brought her small treasures: a smooth stone from the creek, a comic book Tyler had finished, a jay's feather Miguel had found. In return, she'd leave flowers or carefully drawn pictures on her side of the fence. "My dad's hiring another doctor for me," she wrote one afternoon, about 2 weeks into their friendship. Number 17. None of them help. "What's wrong?" Tyler asked gently. "I can't talk. Since Mom died. The words are in my head, but they won't come out." The boys exchanged glances, unsure how to respond to such a personal revelation. "That's okay," Miguel finally said with a shrug. "You talk in your own way." "Yeah," Jamal added. "And we hear you just fine." Tyler nodded in agreement. "Sometimes the best people don't need words." Lily's eyes glistened as she wrote. "No one's ever said that before. Everyone else just tries to fix me." It was a sunny Friday afternoon when their secret friendship was discovered. The boys arrived at their usual meeting spot to find Lily waiting eagerly, a checkerboard balanced on her knees, as she sat cross-legged by the fence. They had been teaching her to play, calling out moves while she positioned pieces on both sides of the board. They were deep into their game, laughing as Miguel made a particularly terrible move when a shadow fell across the board. "What is going on here?" The voice was cold and commanding. The boys looked up to see a tall man in an expensive suit standing behind Lily, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Lily, go inside. Now." The girl's eyes widened in fear, but she didn't move. "I said go inside," he repeated, his tone softening slightly. "Mrs. Garcia is looking for you." Lily gathered her things with trembling hands, casting an apologetic glance at her friends before hurrying away. Once she was gone, the man turned his full attention to the boys. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "We're sorry, sir," Jamal said, straightening his shoulders. "We were just playing with my daughter. Yes, I can see that." The man interrupted. "How long has this been going on?" "About 3 weeks," Tyler admitted quietly. The man, who they realized must be Robert Hayes himself, studied them with calculating eyes. "You're from Riverside, aren't you? The neighborhood across the creek." They nodded. "Do your parents know you're here?" "No, sir," Miguel answered. "But we weren't doing anything wrong. Lily seemed lonely, and we just—" "My daughter's well-being is not your concern." Robert cut him off. "Don't come back here. If I see you on my property again, I'll call the police." With that, he turned and strode away, leaving the boys staring after him in stunned silence. "Well," Jamal finally said, "I guess that's that." But as they trudged home, heavy-hearted at the thought of never seeing Lily again, Tyler stopped suddenly. "No, it's not," he insisted. "She needs us. Did you see her face? We're the only friend she has." "But her dad," said Miguel began. "Her dad is worried and doesn't understand," Tyler countered. "If we were in his position, we'd probably be suspicious too. So what do we do?" Jamal asked. Tyler thought for a moment. "We write her a letter. Let her know we're still her friends, even if we can't see her for a while. We'll figure something out." The next day, they slipped a note through the fence. Asterisk, "Dear Lily, we're sorry about yesterday. We understand if we can't meet for a while, but we're still your friends. We'll miss our chess games, even though Miguel is terrible at it. Don't worry, we'll figure something out. Your friends, Miguel, Jamal, and Tyler." Asterisk, what they didn't expect was to find Robert Hayes himself waiting for them when they returned to check for a response on Sunday afternoon. Robert had spent a sleepless night after discovering Lily with the boys. His initial reaction had been fear strangers with his vulnerable daughter, followed quickly by anger that they had somehow bypassed the security. But as he watched from his study window later, he was struck by the desolate expression on Lily's face as she wandered alone through the garden she'd shared with these unexpected friends. He had asked Mrs. Garcia about it over breakfast. "Oh, yes, Mr. Hayes," she had said, not looking particularly surprised. "Ms. Lily has been going to garden fence every afternoon for weeks now. It's the first time I've seen her truly animated since she trailed off," not needing to finish the thought. "And you didn't think to inform me?" he asked, his tone sharper than intended. Mrs. Garcia met his gaze directly. "With all due respect, sir, it was the first time she was happy. I didn't want to risk that ending." Those words haunted him throughout the day. By the time he saw the boys approaching the garden fence the following afternoon, he had made a decision. "I'm not here to call the police," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace as the three boys froze at the sight of him. "I just want to talk." He opened a side gate they hadn't noticed before and gestured for them to enter. The boys exchanged nervous glances before Miguel took the first tentative step forward, the others following his lead. Inside the garden, the full beauty of Elizabeth's creation surrounded them: lush flower beds, winding paths, and hidden nooks designed for quiet contemplation. Robert led them to a small patio with a table and chairs. "Have a seat," he said, his businessman's instincts taking over as he assessed these three children who had somehow breached his daughter's silence, if not her voice. "I believe introductions are in order. I'm Miguel Rodriguez," the confident one said immediately. "Jamal Washington," the tallest offered with a respectful nod. "Tyler Bennett," the smallest added, nervously adjusting his glasses. "Robert Hayes," he replied, though they clearly already knew. "I understand you've been visiting my daughter." "Yes, sir," Miguel answered. "We found this place by accident, but then we met Lily and she asked us to come back." "She did?" This surprised him. "Well, she wrote it down," Tyler clarified, pulling a folded paper from his pocket, one of Lily's notes. We talk and she writes. She's really nice." Robert took the offered note, something tightening in his chest as he recognized his daughter's handwriting. Asterisk. "Will you come back tomorrow? Please? No one else talks to me like a normal person." Asterisk. "What do you talk about?" he asked, genuinely curious. The boys launched into an animated explanation of their daily conversations, everything from school problems to neighborhood adventures to debates about the best superhero movies. They showed him the small treasures they'd exchanged and described their chess games through the fence. As he listened, Robert began to understand what had been happening. These boys, with nothing to offer but their friendship, had given Lily something all his resources couldn't buy: normalcy. They didn't see her as a traumatized, mute daughter of a millionaire. They just saw Lily. "Sir," Tyler said hesitantly when there was a lull in the conversation. "Is Lily okay? She told us, wrote to us about all the doctors." Robert sighed, surprising himself with his willingness to confide in these children. "Physically, she's fine. After her mother died, she just stopped speaking. No medical reason for it. The psychiatrist called it selective mutism, triggered by trauma. That happens sometimes." Tyler nodded sagely. "I read about it. The brain kind of shuts down parts of itself to protect from pain." Robert looked at the boy with newfound respect. "That's right. We've tried everything, the best specialist therapies, even hypnosis. Nothing's worked. Maybe she just needs friends more than doctors," Miguel suggested simply. Before Robert could respond, movement near the house caught his attention. Lily stood on the back terrace, watching them with wide, uncertain eyes. Robert gestured for her to join them. After a moment's hesitation, she walked slowly across the lawn toward their table. "Lily, I've been talking with you," he paused, unsure how to describe these boys. "Friends," Jamal supplied confidently. "We're her friends." A tiny smile touched Lily's lips as she reached the table, her eyes darting between her father and the boys. "I thought maybe," Robert continued carefully, "they could stay for dinner, if they'd like to." The transformation in Lily's face was immediate, and stunning pure joy illuminated her features as she nodded vigorously, reaching for her ever-present notepad to scribble. "Yes, please." And so began a new chapter. The boys were invited to visit properly, coming to the front gate rather than sneaking glimpses through the fence. Robert observed from a distance as they played board games on the lawn, swam in the pool he'd installed that Lily had rarely used, and brought life to the empty halls of his mansion. Mrs. Garcia seemed to approve, making extra cookies when he visited and fussing over Tyler's too thin frame. Even Stanley, the stern security chief, eventually softened, teaching Jamal a few chess moves when he found him practicing alone. Robert kept waiting for the other shoe to drop for something to go wrong, or for the boys to reveal ulterior motives. But as weeks passed, he was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. These children from the wrong side of town, with their worn clothes and simple backgrounds, had succeeded where all his money had failed. He began to notice changes in Lily. Small at first, a brightness in her eyes, an eagerness to get up in the morning, her increasing appetite. Then bigger signs laughing out loud at Miguel's jokes, sitting closer to people instead of maintaining her usual distance, actually hugging Mrs. Garcia goodnight. But still, she didn't speak. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in August, nearly 2 months after the boys had first appeared at the garden fence. Robert had come home early, exhausted from back-to-back meetings. He was passing through the kitchen when he heard commotion in the backyard. Through the window, he saw the 3 boys helping Mrs. Garcia hang laundry while Lily arranged flowers in a basket. Domestic tranquility, something his mansion hadn't seen since Elizabeth's death. As he watched, Stanley approached the group, his expression unusually stern. He spoke to Miguel, whose face fell immediately. The other boys gathered around, concern evident in their postures. Robert stepped onto the patio in time to hear Stanley saying, "Can't allow it on the property. It's against regulations." "What's going on?" Robert asked, approaching the group. Stanley straightened. "Sir, I found this in Miguel's backpack when I was helping them bring in their swim things." He held up a small pocket knife. "As you know, our security protocols prohibit weapons of any kind on the premises." Miguel looked stricken. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. I completely forgot it was in there. My uncle gave it to me for my birthday last weekend. I was showing it to my dad this morning, and must have put it in my backpack without thinking." Robert could see it was a simple Swiss Army knife, the kind he himself had owned as a boy. Nothing threatening, but Stanley was correct about the protocols. "I understand protocol, Stanley," Robert began, "but I'm sure this was just an innocent—" "No." The voice was small and raspy from disuse, but unmistakable. Every head swiveled toward Lily, who stood with her hands clenched at her sides, her face flushed with emotion. "No," she repeated, the word stronger this time. "Not Miguel's fault. Don't make him go." The world seemed to freeze. Robert stared at his daughter, who had just spoken her first words in 3 years to defend a boy she had known for less than 3 months. Mrs. Garcia crossed herself, murmuring a quick prayer of thanks. Stanley's stern demeanor crumbled into shock. The boys looked at Lily with expressions of pure joy rather than surprise, as if they had always known she could do it. "Lily," Robert whispered, tears filming his eyes. She turned to him, her small chin raised in determination. "They stay," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "All of them. They're my friends." Robert didn't realize he was moving until he had gathered Lily in his arms, lifting her off the ground in an embrace that tried to express 3 years of unspoken love and worry and hope. And when he felt her thin arms wrap around his neck, returning the hug with equal fervor, something long broken inside him began to mend. Through his tears, he saw the 3 boys standing awkwardly nearby, unsure whether to stay or give the father and daughter privacy. Mrs. Garcia was openly weeping, and even Stanley looked suspiciously misty-eyed. "Thank you," Robert said over Lily's shoulder, looking directly at Miguel, Jamal, and Tyler. "Thank you," he repeated, unable to find words adequate for what they had given him. Later that evening, after the initial shock had worn off and the boys had gone home with promises to return tomorrow, Robert sat with Lily on the garden bench by the fountain. She was talking, haltingly, sometimes searching for words, but talking about the flowers and her friends and 100 small observations she had stored up over the years of silence. "Why today?" he finally asked during a lull. "After all this time, what made you speak today?" Lily considered the question, running her fingers through the fountain water. "Miguel needed me," she said simply, "more than I needed to be afraid." Robert nodded, understanding washing over him. In her silence, Lily had created a protected space where nothing could hurt her again, not even him. But these boys had somehow shown her something worth leaving that space for: connection, friendship, purpose beyond herself. "Dad?" she asked, her voice still new and precious to his ears. "Yes, sweetheart." "Why are we so rich when they're so poor?" Miguel shares a bedroom with his two sisters. Tyler's dad can't find work. Jamal's grandma works, even though her hands hurt all the time. The question struck Robert like a physical blow. How could he explain systemic inequality to a child? But looking into her earnest face, he realized she wasn't asking for an economics lesson. She was asking why he, specifically, had done nothing about it when he clearly had the means to help. And he had no good answer. Robert's transformation didn't happen overnight. Old habits and worldviews aren't easily discarded, even in the face of miracles. But change did come, accelerated by a crisis that forced his hand. It began with a phone call from Tyler 2 weeks after Lily had spoken her first words. The boy was in tears, barely coherent. "They're being evicted," Lily explained after speaking to him, her voice growing stronger each day with practice. Tyler's dad lost his job 3 months ago, and they can't pay rent. They have to be out by Friday. Robert's instinct was to write a check, the quickest, easiest solution. But Lily shook her head. "That's not enough, Dad. Tyler's dad needs work, not charity. He's a really good carpenter. He made all their furniture." "Sweetheart," Robert tried to explain gently, "my company doesn't really hire. Then what good is it?" Lily interrupted, her eyes flashing with fire reminiscent of her mother. "What good is all this?" She gestured around at their mansion. "If we can't help the people we care about." Her words echoed in his mind that night as he lay awake, confronting uncomfortable truths about the walls he'd built, not just around his property, but around his heart. He had responded to Elizabeth's death by retreating further into wealth and status, as if acquiring more could fill the void she left. Meanwhile, Lily had retreated into silence for the same reason. Both had been broken. But while he had tried to fix Lily with money, she had been healed by something money couldn't buy. The next morning, Robert made 3 phone calls. By Friday, Tyler and his father had moved into the guest house on the Hayes property, a temporary arrangement, while Mr. Bennett worked as the newly hired head of maintenance for Robert's estate, with additional oversight of similar positions at all Robert's corporate properties. Within a month, Jamal's grandmother had been hired as a community liaison for a new foundation Robert established, with a salary generous enough that she could finally retire from her cleaning jobs and focus on what she did best, connecting people and resources. As for Miguel's family, Robert arranged for his mother to receive a nursing scholarship she long dreamed of but could never afford, plus a stipend generous enough that she could reduce her work hours while studying. "You're different," his COO remarked during a meeting in September, after Robert had rejected a cost-cutting proposal that would have eliminated jobs at their factory. 6 months ago, you would have approved this without blinking. Robert thought of Lily, who now spoke clearly and confidently, especially when advocating for others. He thought of the 3 boys who had become fixtures in his home, bringing with him a perspective he had long forgotten from his own humble beginnings. 6 months ago, he replied, I confused the price of things with their value. When Lily started 8th grade that fall, she did so at the public school where her friends attended, despite Robert's initial reservations. I want to be normal, Dad, she had insisted. Please. He compromised by hiring additional security and upgrading the school's outdated facilities as a community investment that benefited all students, not just his daughter. And on weekends, the Hayes Mansion, once an isolated fortress of privilege, became a gathering place. The garden that Elizabeth had created and Lily had maintained now hosted community events, mentorship programs, and the occasional impromptu soccer game that inevitably tracked mud onto Mrs. Garcia's clean floors. One evening, as Robert watched Lily laughing with her friends on the lawn, Mrs. Garcia appeared beside him with a cup of coffee. She's her mother's daughter. The housekeeper observed with a smile. Mrs. Hayes would be proud. Of Lily, absolutely, Robert agreed. Of me, I'm not so sure. I lost my way for a while there. Mrs. Garcia studied him thoughtfully. You know what Mrs. Hayes used to say about that garden? That every beautiful thing needs both sunshine and rain to grow. Perhaps you both needed the storm to become who you were meant to be. Robert nodded, watching as Lily threw her head back in laughter at something Miguel had said. Her voice, once lost but now found, rang out clear and joyful across the property that had once felt like a prison to them both. Some might say it was the three boys who had performed a miracle, teaching Lily to speak again. But Robert knew the deeper truth. They had taught them both the same lesson, that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. That connection matters more than collection. That sometimes the richest people are those with empty pockets but full hearts. And that, Robert realized as he joined the group on the lawn, was worth more than all the millions in his bank account. And that's how three ordinary boys from the wrong side of town changed a millionaire's life forever. They didn't just give Lily her voice back, they gave Robert back his humanity, reminding him of what truly matters in life. Today, the Hayes Foundation has helped hundreds of families in their community, providing education, housing assistance, and job opportunities. The garden where it all began is now open to the public every weekend, a symbol of how breaking down walls, both literal and metaphorical, can heal even the deepest wounds. As for Miguel, Jamal, and Tyler, they're still best friends with Lily, now all in their senior year of high school. Miguel runs a track team, Jamal is headed to college on a basketball scholarship, and Tyler is following in Robert's entrepreneurial footsteps, having developed a literacy app that helps children communicate through difficult emotions. Sometimes the most profound changes come from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes all it takes to find your voice is someone who truly listens.